श्री स्वामीनारायण भगवाननी जय। अक्षर पुरुषोत्तम महाराजनी जय। गुणातीतानंद स्वामी महाराजनी जय। भगत जी महाराजनी जय। शास्त्री जी महाराजनी जय। योगी जी महाराजनी जय। प्रमुख स्वामी महाराजनी जय। महंत स्वामी महाराजनी जय। प्रमुख स्वामी महाराज शताब्दी महोत्सवनी जय। अक्षरधाम महोत्सवनी जय। Yogi Ji Maharaj was in London in 1970, and at that time lunch was organized at Ramesh Bhai's house. Yogi Ji Maharaj and the Pujya Santos, they went to Ramesh Bhai's house. They sat down, and the Santos noticed that there wasn't enough space for the two parshads. So they started to squeeze in, and they made room to accommodate two parshads. Seeing this, Yogi Ji Maharaj became very pleased. And Yogi Ji Maharaj said, કે જુઓ તમારામાં સંપ છે તો કેવી રીતે ગોઠવાઈ ગયા. કે look, you guys have Samp, so look how you were able to accommodate one another. A very small action, but it earned the Rajipa of Yogi Ji Maharaj. When Pujya Mahant Swami Maharaj was in London in 2017, there was a satsang shibir, and in that satsang shibir the Karyakars asked Mahant Swami Maharaj to narrate a prasang in which it would inspire them in regards to Samp. So Pujya Mahant Swami Maharaj, he explained one prasang when Yogi Ji Maharaj was in Nadiyad, and there was these two individuals. They were both brothers. They weren't in satsang, and they had gotten into a dispute. But when Yogi Ji Maharaj came to Nadiyad, and for some reason they were able to resolve their dispute, Yogi Ji Maharaj learnt of this and immediately called those two individuals. Yogi Ji Maharaj, he fed them pendas. And then he said that he wanted to do danvats to both of these individuals. Doing manan on this prasang, Pujya Mahant Swami Maharaj says that these individuals weren't even in satsang, but yet they demonstrated the attributes of Samp, and they earned the Rajipa of Yogi Ji Maharaj to the extent that Yogi Ji Maharaj wanted to do danvats to them. When we look at these two prasangs, we could think that, to accommodate Samp is a very small action of just being able to accommodate one another. But why is it so difficult for us to accommodate Samp if it's so easy and we could earn Mahant Swami Maharaj's Rajipo? But yet when we try to accommodate Samp, it becomes very difficult. Well, Gunaditanand Swami in his Swamini Vat has said that Jivne char ghati che. There are 4 challenges in satsang. The first one is to understand Purushottam. The second is to understand the sadhu. The third one is to detach ourselves from the panch vishayas. And the fourth is to understand the difference between the Atma and this body. Reading the Swamini Vato, Yogi Ji Maharaj added a 5th challenge. Yogi Ji Maharaj says ke bhega rahine mahima samajhu એ પાંચમી ઘાટી છે. To stay together and understand one another's mahima, to understand one another's virtues, is the 5th challenge in satsang. And so for us to be able to stay within satsang, understand each other's mahima, we need to be able to change our lens. We need to change our lens in the way that Mahant Swami Maharaj sees all of us. Even though that we have our shortcomings and we have our faults, Pujya Mahant Swami Maharaj still sees us as Divya. Pujya Mahant Swami Maharaj was doing his walk, and during his walk on the side, the Pujya Santos were all sitting, and he passed by one, he started waving his fingers, and he says ke tame divya cho, tame divya cho, tame divya cho. You are all divine. And so the Santos, they asked Mahant Swami Maharaj ke you see all of our doshas, how do you see us as divya? They gave Pujya Mahant Swami Maharaj 3 different options. The first option was કે સંબંધના મહિમા કરીને દિવ્ય સમજવું. Just because we have the association of Bhagwan and his Sant, Ekantik Sant, that you see us as divya. The second option was that because we were on this path of becoming divya, that you see us divya. And the third option was ke ajiv che e divya che. And Mahant Swami Maharaj, he selected the third option, ke tame divya cho. So this is Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj's divya drishti. And so when we change our lens to Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj's lens, divya drishti, automatically impacts our behavior, the way that we see others, the way that we're able to tolerate their mistakes, their shortcomings, the way that we have compassion towards different people's mistakes. It's all in the way that we see one another. Robert Rosenthal, in 1965, he created an experiment. He created the intelligence identification tool. And so he took this experiment to an elementary school in California. And so he explained to the teachers and the faculty that this test would allow the teachers to identify individuals, students that are high potential in their intelligence. And so everyone liked the idea, and so they decided to perform the test. And so performing the test, he came up with the results and he shared it with the teacher. About 20% of the student body was identified as high potential. And so when they gave the list to the teachers, they started teaching the students accordingly. And Robert Rosenthal said that disregard any past behaviors. Maybe they didn't demonstrate any scope of high aptitude. But these test results shows that they have potential to excel in academics. And so after 1 year, Robert Rosenthal came back and he performed the test again. And as he expected, in the first grade, 27 students scored a higher IQ of 27 points versus 12 IQ points than the rest of the class. In the second grade, it was 17 IQ points increased compared to 7 IQ points for the rest of the class. Now, the twist to this experiment is that this whole experiment was baloney. There was no high potential tool that would identify these students. It was more into understanding the relationship between the teacher and the students. And when the teacher saw the students as having high potentials, they automatically treated their students differently. They gave them more attention. They helped them out more with their homeworks. They answered their questions with more diligence. And so we see that when one individual sees someone else with a high capacity or high potential, their behaviors change. Now just imagine if we started seeing everyone in satsang as divya. Our behavior towards them would change. Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj was in Nairobi, and during Mahant Swami Maharaj's puja, a bardak, he performed Mukpat of Vartal 5. And many times as we have to do public speaking, sometimes, we start making mistakes. And so this kid, he started making a bunch of mistakes. And everyone put their head down. They started doing dun, he quickly finishes his mukpa and so forth. And somehow he was able to finish. He sat down, he was embarrassed. Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj was doing his danwats. And immediately he called the bardak. He patted him on his back, he gave him ashirwad. And Mahant Swami Maharaj ke bahut saru karyu છે. Bhale bhul કરી, પણ સારું થશે. Now just these few words of encouragement, they made that kid's day. And so we see that, if we were put into this situations, it would have been easily to make fun of that kid, give him a nickname for the rest of his life. Or some of us would blame the Sanchalak for not preparing the kids and not having them ready for the presentation in front of Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj. And so we see it's all dependent upon how we see the situation. Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj, he saw the Barak and he saw him as Divya. And so even though he made a mistake, he was able to still encourage him. in Sarangpur, as the Puja Santos had gathered around Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj. Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj was about to go to sleep. And so one of the Santos said, Ke Bhayo Santo ki bheed. In Sarangpur there's many Santos. And so as all of the Santos has congregated around Mahant Swami Maharaj, they said that Bhayo Santo no ki bheed. Okay, there's a lot of Santos here. And immediately Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj says, Kya bheed sari che. Okay, I like this crowd. And then one of the sons said, Ke Swami, you know all our swabhavs, you know all of our doshas. You must most look at those doshas and see them and recognize them. Mahant Swami Maharaj says कि ये दोषों ने गणत्रिया में राखता ज नथी. Now, when we think about it in satsang, we see our doshas and we see the doshas of many other people. But Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj, regardless of our doshas, he still sees us as divya. So changing our lens means to see every individual as divya. And when we see individuals as divya, our behavior towards them changes. We're more compassionate towards them, we're more respectful for them, and we pray for them that they could progress in satsang. Another part of changing our lens when we see divya is that it impacts our words. Our words become more encouraging. And words are very impactful in the concept of Samp. There was a study done in the Harvard Business School by Alison Wood Brooks. She had created two different scenarios. In the first scenario, an individual would be standing in the rain and a stranger would approach them and ask if they could borrow the cell phone. In situation number two, scenario number two, an individual would be standing in the rain and a stranger would approach, but he would say, sorry about the rain, can I borrow your cell phone? Now both of these scenarios or both of these situations seem very similar, and we would think that they would yield the same result. But to everyone's astonishment, the second scenario, where the words had changed, sorry about the rain, just adding these few words, they sent cues that, that individual had compassion, that individual understood one another. And that in itself raised the acceptance or giving the cell phone to 422%. And so we see that sometimes just changing our words, being a little bit more polite, being a little bit more compassionate, it yields a bigger result. And so the same thing that we see with Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj. So in this example, we see that our words impact us a great deal. The way that we, say our words, it shares cues of how we are doing Samp, how we bring people together. And sometimes, we don't realize it, but, we have to think a little bit harder. Puja Dr. Swami in 2010 was traveling within the United States. And we had an opportunity as Santos to do Goshti with Puja Dr. Swami. And this particular occasion, there was a Hari Bhakta that had written multiple times to Dr. Swami. And every time Dr. Swami gave that Hari Bhakta the same guidance. And the Hari Bhakta had the same question for Puja Dr. Swami. And so the Santos asked Puja Dr. Swami, how can you have so much patience with this one Hari Bhakta? Over and over again, he's still asking the same question. And you give him the same guidance. Dr. Swami says that, whatever is wrong with me. Santos said that, Swami, there's no room for you to make a mistake in this situation. You have done everything perfectly. And Puja Dr. Swami says, no, if I do antardrashti, I could find a way that I should cultivate more atmiyata with that Hari Bhakta. And if I had cultivated more atmiyata with that Hari Bhakta, he would be able to open up and really share what's on his mind. And then if he didn't understand my guidance, he would be able to ask what he was confused about. But since I haven't created that atmiyata with this Hari Bhakta, that Hari Bhakta over and over repeatedly asked me that same question. And that's why I so patiently could reply to him. Now we think about it, that Puja Dr. Swami, he's very particular in everything that he does. He's very diligent. He has very great patience. But in this person, we see that there is no scope that you could probably find your own mistake. But Puja Dr. Swami, he wanted to find a way that he could improve. And when it comes to Samp, sometimes in a very casual manner, we may say something, and we may not even realize the impact that it has in the person that we're interacting with. And so we have to become more aware of what we say and how we interact with individuals. Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj was in Rajkot, and Mahant Swami Maharaj for a few days was having difficulty in his walk, and his health wasn't so well. And slowly Mahant Swami Maharaj started to recover, and they called a physiotherapist, Dr. Rahul Bhai, and he was helping Mahant Swami Maharaj with his walk. And so this particular day, Mahant Swami Maharaj did a very good walk. And so when Mahant Swami Maharaj finished his walk, he sat down. One of the Sevak Santos, they put their hand out and they go, Swami, give me a tadi. And Mahant Swami Maharaj gave him a high five. And then Mahant Swami Maharaj says, कि आपने राहुल भाई ने BAPS ना स्टाइल में 3 ताड़ी नु मान आपी है. And so all the Santos and the Hari Bhaktas that were there, they gave a 3 tadi numan to Rahul Bhai. And so Rahul Bhai said that, Swami, when you start running, then that's when you could give me 3 tadi numan. And so one of the Sevak sons, he says, Ke ashakya, this is impossible. At this age, Mahant Swami Maharaj is never going to be able to run. And so the other son standing next to him says ke tame modi વાત કરી એટલે આવતી કાલે તમે ઉપવાસ એ કરી દેજો. And so Mahant Swami Maharaj saw that there was some conversation going, so he asked, okay, what's the conversation about? And so everyone explained to Mahant Swami Maharaj. Mahant Swami Maharaj goes ke nastik, meaning ke he doesn't believe in me. And so the whole prasang had finished. Mahant Swami Maharaj was getting up, and right as he was getting up, he says, Ke ani be vaat karo. Say 2 positive things about this sant. And so the sant that Mahant Swami Maharaj had called Nastik, a non-believer, Mahant Swami Maharaj made sure that everyone said something positive. And then Mahant Swami Maharaj, when he got up, he page lagdwa that sant, and then he continued. A very simple, small prasang, but in this prasang we could see that Mahant Swami Maharaj was so aware of what he had said. Even in a jokingly manner, he made sure that there was no negativity created in this environment. And so we see that sometimes, we are very informal in our conversations or in our interactions. And sometimes we say something, but when we say something, it may create kusam. But if we have the Divya Drashti that Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj has, if we change our lens to that Divya Drashti, then automatically it's reflected into our Vani, into our words. Similarly, as we change our Divya Drashti, and it impacts our behavior, it also impacts our actions. We're more, willing to help one another. The co-founder for McDonald's, Ray Rock, he would go around and visit all his McDonald's stores. And when we think about, the owner or founder of the franchise, and when he would come to visit the stores, we would think that he would come and do an audit, or he would do some type of a session to motivate or train individuals. But Roy Rock would go around, and in the evenings, he would walk around the parking lot and pick up all the trash. Many times he would come into the store, both of his hands filled with cups and paper wrappers and so forth. One day, a particular Saturday, he went to one of his stores and he checked the mop wringer, and he noticed that there was a bunch of crud on it. And so he took a toothbrush and he spent half of his Saturday morning cleaning the mop wringer to making sure it was clean. And so we see that even though he was the founder for McDonald's franchise, he demonstrated or he acted like a das. And so when we see that, when we have this Divya Drashti, automatically that changes into our actions. Puja Pramukh Swami Maharaj was in Bombay, and the Yuvaks had gathered for Yuva Din. And so as they were celebrating Yuva Din, there was a skit. And in this skit, there was a scene right before Sabha. And everything was unorganized. The mat was unorganized, the murti wasn't there, And so individuals started coming to see the sabha, to come and tend the sabha. And when they came, they saw everything was unorganized. And so someone would complain, oh, look, this Sanchalak isn't doing anything. Someone came by and says, oh, it doesn't look like there's sabha today, and just left. And so after this whole skit was performed, they asked Puja Bapa for Ashirwad. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj talked about how we should have ownership, Dharni Parnu. And, even though it's not a responsibility, we should help one another and make sure that everything happens. And so after Pramukh Swami Maharaj's Ashirwad, Swami Bapa got up, and as he was going to his Utaro, he went straight to that scene and he started the Patharnu, the mat that was meant for the Sabha. Pramukh Swami Maharaj started organizing that. And he goes, ke pehla mare swayam sevak thavu pade. Meaning ke it has to start for me. Charity begins at home. And so we see that Pramukh Swami Maharaj always demonstrated that, seeing everyone as divya, that translates into your action, that you could easily help them. After the Samayo in Ahmedabad, Puja Narayan Prasad Swami, he was taking a lari with trash, and it was very heavy, and the lari was meant to be pulled by 2 individuals, but he was pulling it all by himself. Pramukh Swami Maharaj, he came outside of his Utaro and he saw that Narayan Prasad Swami was struggling with this lari to take it up the hill. And immediately Pramukh Swami Maharaj, he went and started helping Narayan Prasad Swami with the lari. Just a big Samayo just had finished, and there was, great fanfare. Pramukh Swami Maharaj no adbhut sanman thayu hase. But for a second, Pramukh Swami Maharaj did not think that he shouldn't help someone. He immediately went and started helping Narayan Prasad Swami. And so we see that when we change our lens to having Divya Drashti, it becomes easier and easier for us to help one another, to do seva for one another. If we do not have Divya Drashti, then it's very easy to look at the faults of others and just say, okay, well, this person, it's his responsibility. He should do it on his own. Why should I help him? And so to cultivate Samp, we need to change our lens to having Divya Drashti. And so we see that, to have Samp, one of the facets is to change our Drashti. And with our Drashti, our behaviors change, our Vani changes, our actions to help one another changes. And so it's very easy to listen to all of these concepts. But when it comes to actually implementing it into our lives, we have to put in a bit of effort. Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj was in Ahmedabad, and there was a shibir, and the Karyakars did this really magnificent drama on Samp. And after that drama was finished, Mahant Swami Maharaj says, okay, make sure you take this vat of Samp very seriously. He goes, ke tame natak bhajavyo. But if you don't take it seriously, then natak nu undu thase. Ele natak take nahi. Ele he goes, if you don't take it seriously, you won't be able to cultivate Samp. Then Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj says, for us to be able to cultivate Samp, it has to start with us. And so this concept of Samp, Puja Sastriji Maharaj, Puja Yogiji Maharaj, Puja Pramukh Swami Maharaj, and Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj, they put a great deal of emphasis. Now it's up to us to start having more Samp by changing our lens. Shri Swaminarayan Bhagwan and Jai.
I've got to say, the idea of me taking ownership, that idea resonates with me. It makes that end goal, where we live well together, more clear to see. And it's a good reminder that that future is in my hands. And that's less daunting to venture toward, isn't it? I love the way Puja Priya Seva Swami so eloquently conveyed Swami Bapa's prescription. Bapa said, I have to wear the lens of Divya Drashti. To be willing to see good in everyone, to see others as flawless. And when I do, he said looking out at the world with that lens, I'll see a change. I'll treat others better. My words will become more true, more good, more loving. And above all, my actions will foster more and more Samp, Guru Hari Mahant Swami Maharaj made it abundantly clear. It's my responsibility to keep Samp. It's my responsibility to bring peace into my home. I know it will take time, which is all the more reason to start today. Right now. After all good things must begin.
ના ફાવતું હોય ને તમે પાસે બેઠો હોય ને તો આમ અંદરથી ઉપર ના કર પણ અંદરથી આ ક્યાં મોહ બેઠો છે ક્યાં ચોટ્યો છે એવું થાય. હરિભક્તને પરસ્પર હેત ના હોય, પરસ્પર હેત ના હોય, હરિભક્તોને પરસ્પર હેત ના હોય તો સાધન અપાર કરે તો પણ ફળ મળતું નથી. બધી સેવા ભક્તિ બધું કરો તમે, ફળ મળે નહીં, અટકી રહે. અને આપણે અહીંયા સુધી જઈએ ને એન્ટર થવામાં પટકી રીતે મહિમા સમજો તરત એન્ટર થઈ જાય. મહિમા ગમે હોય અને ભગવાનના છે, ભગવાનના બનાવેલા છે, એટલે આપણે ભગવાનનો મહિમા સમજીને ભગવાનમાં રસબસ રહીને બધાનો મહિમા સમજો. અને આપણે કોઈ દુશ્મન નથી એ ખાસ ધ્યાનમાં રાખો.
અંદર તો સુરત ભાવ નહીં હોય, મહિમા નહીં હોય તો આવો મહિમા નહીં સમજાય તમને. અંદર થશે તારો મહિમા સમજાશે. તો સ્વામી શાસ્ત્રીનો મહિમા કેટલો બધો છે. તો જો આ બધા મહિમા સમજાશે ને તો આ સમજાશે. એટલે એ પણ આપણે કરવાનું. અંદર સંપીને એકબીજાને ગુણગ્રહણ કહીને, એકબીજાને મોટા માનીને, એકબીજાને આમન્ય રાખીને એનો એક કરીને જો કરીએ તો દીવ વાતાવરણ મંદિર અક્ષરધામ ઊભું થઈ જાય.